Hey guys, today let's talk a little bit more on what is the problem and how can we create a sustainable world. It took me quite a few years to figure out that why we're so ineffective with bringing change to the world is we don't have a good understanding of what is the root problem. Mostly what we see is what I call surface problems. We see the poverty, we see the war, the inequality, we see the environmental destruction. Now, if you reflect on that, you come to the conclusion that the true cause is inside of us, the true cause of all the problems. In my mind, a decision is made whether I'm gonna plant a tree or chop a tree. In my mind, it is decided whether I raise my hands to hit someone or maybe I raise my hands to give someone a hug. This is an important first step. So this is an inner problem. Most of us are very busy trying to change the outside, the perceived problems, but we're not changing the true cause, the root problem, which is on the inside. So as you might have seen in the post for day one of our worldwide implementation phase, I talk about the problem and the solution. So the problem is what we call the lower egoic state of consciousness. This is also known as duality consciousness or separation consciousness. Remember, it's not about the labels. In this state of consciousness, our minds are busy. Lots of thoughts, lots of stress, fear, anger, frustration. It is a lower vibration. Part of the problem is that as human beings, we are very identified with the thoughts and feelings. So let's talk about this. Reflect on having thoughts. We're doing all this thinking, incessant thinking. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Is it that you consciously choose what you're going to think about and then the thought is coming to your mind? Is it like that? Or is it that most thoughts, most of the time, simply arise somehow in our mind? It's the latter, right? Most thoughts, most of the time, they just arise, plop, and a thought is there. The problem is that between the thought and our response, or here reaction, for most of us there is not much of a gap. If life can be described in two words, stimulus, response, then the gap between stimulus and response will define how much power you have in life. For most of us, this gap is non-existent. We are completely identified with our thoughts and feelings, and immediately our thoughts and feelings become words and action. And I'm sure you have discovered that when you're in a reactivated state, you're angry, you're upset, that the actions we take are not really the best actions. So, the inner violence, which comes from being in this default state of egoic consciousness, is the root problem. And being identified with that, we keep on bringing these forms of violence to the world. And that delivers us all the surface problems. If nobody would participate in a war, there cannot be war. So the problem is we are not very aware of our life situation, and we run around like, and I say this without judgment, we run around like reactive creatures, every time reacting to life, and therefore every time we are spreading, strengthening that lower egoic state of consciousness. So we see a world where people, their mental well-being is not very good. You might not be very disturbed, but every little disturbance and identification with painful, separating, sabotaging thought will bring that inner violence outside in our world. So what do we do in our Sustainable World project? It is about creating higher consciousness leaders. Meaning you start first understanding a little bit about our minds, about consciousness, and then you start working on increasing the gap between stimulus and response. So we become less reactive, and in the gap between stimulus and response, we can reflect, we can do critical thinking, we can practice our observation skills, and then we can choose a response, a communication, or an action from a place of a higher awareness, a higher state of consciousness. So then a higher conscious leader speaks from a place of wisdom, from a place of commitment, from a place of purpose. This will completely change how you respond to the stimuli outside of you. If I see people fighting, I don't join the fight. If I see people in a lower vibration, I don't resonate. I don't join that lower vibration. And through present moment awareness, I maintain a higher state of consciousness where I reflect on any next communications and actions I'm going to take. If we do this with a critical mass, then as all minds, all consciousness is finally connected as one, if we elevate the state of consciousness for a critical mass, we are elevating the collective consciousness for all people. And this is the transition we are currently in. And through our program, our objective is to reduce the duration of this transition. So instead of taking 50 years to move to a world that works for all, through critical mass actions where we're inspiring people to stay in this higher state of consciousness, not reacting to life like a madman, but being mindful, mature human beings, or leaders, as we say, responding to life from a place of wisdom. Responding not because of identification with words and feelings, but we habituate heart-centered behavior, revolving around key heart virtues like appreciation, compassion, forgiveness, humility, understanding, and valor. This is what the Sustainable World Project is all about. Creating an inner shift, and the result or the reflection of that will be a outer shift.